Good morning again. It is, for those who are at ministry school, apologies for the little bit of overlap. As you know, I got back from Hikoi. Me and Jenny went on a Hikoi, went on a pilgrimage to Santiago de Compostela in Spain about 10 weeks ago, I think it was. And we had an amazing time. We walked 800 or so kilometres, not all in one day. We spread it out over a few days. And we spent about 30 days walking. And what was amazing to us, though, is we're on this journey, and I was totally over people. I was going into my introvert eye space, and I didn't want to talk to anybody, so it was really great. So when the Germans came and talked to us, I just said, I don't speak German. Spanish speak to us, I said, I don't speak Spanish. The French speak to us, I say, I don't speak French. The English speak to us, I just say, I don't speak English. And it worked pretty well. But after a few days of travelling with a group of people, they finally sort of got it out of me what I do. And they said, so what do you do, when you're not on pilgrimage? And I said, I'm the bishop. And what was really annoying is that they kept wanting to talk about it. So I'm just wanting to do this pilgrimage, I'm over people, I don't want to talk to them. And they keep wanting to discuss what it means to be a bishop, what their views on the church is, what do I think about God. I'm lying in bed one night in this hostel, like 20 people in bunks. There's this old fella, French guy living in Norway, just keeps shouting out across the room, so Bishop, what do you think about this? I once heard this verse, what do you think about that? And I just couldn't get to sleep because this guy was hounding me. I remember when I got back, I got this email from some Australians we walked with, and these Australian non-church people. She wrote an email saying, "I have just read this verse. You should preach on it sometime." So here's the bizarre thing. At any one year, normally about 250,000 people walk the pilgrimage. And of which probably I think only 10% of them are walking it for as followers of Jesus for faith reasons. Probably 90% are just walking it on a journey. But when you talk to them all, they're all actually walking it for a deep reason. And all of them are up for the conversation. But here was the embarrassing thing, is in most cases, not in all cases, but in most cases, the church at the time, when the churches we visited and the monasteries we visited, on the whole, they didn't engage with the pilgrims hardly at all. The hospitality was really poor. And you walk for 30 days, you get into Santiago, and then there's this motor mass in Spanish in 1 hour, that's it, out the door. It's like, hold on, I've just done this 30-day walk. Doesn't somebody want to talk to me? Don't we want to talk about this? But actually, the church, in many ways, had 250,000 people walking this, of which 90% don't own the name of Jesus, and all of them are up for the discussion. But the church, just on the whole, wasn't engaging them. Just to let you know, by the way, I went to Rome after this, and I saw Archbishop David Moxon, and I told him to tell Francis to sort it out. Okay, so I can have this conversation with you, because I have actually talked to the appropriate people. But side issue. But I actually thought that was a really good picture of society at the moment in New Zealand as well. That actually, all around the place, it's people are interested in faith. I mean, example, I was asked to go to Wellington College, secular high school in Wellington. They have an optional course, NZCA level 2 course or 3 course, on religion. They have 100 students optionally choosing the secular school to study religion. So they invite me in to talk to 100 kids at a secular school about faith. That's bizarre, isn't it? I went to another one of our high schools, and I'm sitting in this class, and we're talking about faith, and it was a classics class, and I remember saying to the teacher in the class in front of the kids, I said, this would never have happened 15 years ago. People would have been antagonistic in class towards the message of Jesus, but these young people were just hungry to engage in the conversation. The challenge we have is that people are hungry for Jesus, people are hungry for a faith journey. However, they're not interested in the church as we put it forward. People are hungry, but not interested in what we're saying or doing at this point. I want to show you some stats. These are just stats that we know, but I think it just makes it pretty clear to us. These are from the census data. I know census data is but I think the point is clear, so let's not get too caught up on how accurate the census is. But, okay, there's the population in blue. Population increases in the last 12 years, 13 years, we have decreased. We kind of know that. Next slide. Okay, that's the overall population demographic in our diocese. So that's the shape of the population in our diocese. Okay, now let's track us. That's 2001 Wellington census figures, and let's keep tracking it. Notice that bubble moves across the right. So notice the bulge here is going across. So we are slowly aging every census by 5 years. Next slide. Okay, so you notice 2013 now, where this bulge started over here more, it's now moved right across. Okay, now this is us extrapolating if we keep going the way we're going on 2018. And have we got one more? What's the next one? And this is if we pushed out the 225, we actually go negative in there. I don't think that's possible. I think that's a statistical anomaly, so don't take it seriously, okay? But the point is clear. So we are declining, but what is more of an issue is actually this huge bulge that is apparent that we're missing people below 40. And actually more likely below 50. And there's a massive bulge which is appearing there. Next slide. Okay, this is from the census again. I wouldn't take it too strongly, but the figures are pretty clear. From 2001 to 2006, we had an 8% drop. Then we dropped another 18%. And if all things going equal, we'll drop another 20% by 2018. Okay, next slide. Here's the one that I think is really interesting. The red is over 65s. And the blue is the under 65s. And we've tracked it 2001, 2006, 2013, extrapolated 2018, which is just around the corner, and then we extrapolated 2025. Okay, so you can see what's slowly happening is everybody, the size of the pie is decreasing on the under 65s. Next slide. This is more apparent. Okay. Where the big decline really is the under 40s. Okay. We did have 2025 on there, but at that point the line became so small you couldn't see it, which I'm sure is a statistical anomaly as well. But that's the reality we live in. So under 40s, under 50s are interested in Jesus, but they're not interested in our church at the moment. How do we get to this position? I primarily think, I don't know how many years ever grew up in an evangelical context, but evangelicals were obsessed with boiling frogs. I don't know if you've ever heard that story. They always used to boil frogs and talk about that, and the frog would get slowly boiled and they would never leap out. They were really mean, those evangelicals. SPCA wouldn't get away with that nowadays. But I think that's what's kind of happened to us, is slowly one or two people have left, and we know where they go. So-and-so passed away, so-and-so shifted to Auckland, so-and-so, got a transfer. And we know where everybody's gone, but it's just happened slowly over 10, 20 years, and we haven't noticed that actually we're also slowly aging that time, because we've just kind of done slowly. And so I think when we put it up this way, it actually gives us a really good state of reality where we're at. And what I want to say is, look, it's great to, there's a final one, it's great to label our reality, but I want to say at the same time, it's really apparent to me that God is on the move. Now the question is this though, maybe just that God is moving and actually doesn't need the Anglican Church anymore. But I want to say why I think actually we have something important to offer into the future. Let me just talk about why it's great to be Anglican and what we have to offer in the future, and actually why I think it's worth us actually reimagining ourselves into the future. First of all, I think we have something to offer because we're a church of word and sacrament. We proclaim the good news of Jesus. Every time we meet, we read from the Gospels, and we're a church that proclaims the good news of Jesus. And we're a church of the sacrament where every time we meet, we do a sacrament which is a visible sign of an invisible grace of the Holy Spirit transforming our lives. We're proclamation of the gospel and the Holy Spirit transforming lives. We're a church which is local. We're found in every community. every community. We're not just some mega church. We're a local church. We're a global church. We are in just about every country of the world. We're there. And we're a historical church which finds ourselves going back 2,000 years. You could say we're a Catholic church. We're a apostolic church, where we're a people who recognise that we're called to bear witness and that we are sent. We are an incarnational church, where whatever country we find ourselves, we translate the prayers, we reimagine the prayers. We come to New Zealand and our early missionaries lived amongst the Māori people. We are an incarnational church by very nature. We don't ask people to come to us like Jesus, we come to them. We're a church which keeps our head in the game. We're thinking about the issues. We want to deeply wrestle with the issues. That's why we're wrestling with the same-sex issue. Other people can ignore it. We're going to wrestle with it because we're a church that takes the brain seriously. We're a church also which recognises that the good news of Jesus, the good news of Jesus is the good news to the poor and is the good news of justice. That's why when I came in here and I started my mihi, what I said is, the Spirit of the Lord is upon us to preach good news to the poor. That's our mandate. And so therefore we proudly sit in the tradition of William Wilberforce and the Clapham set. We proudly sit in the tradition of the early missionaries who came to this place and sided with Māori when their land was stolen. And they advocated and were known as traitors to their own Pākehā people because they stood for justice. We stand in the tradition of the people who did the hikoia hope across this country. There is a place for us in the future. We're a people of justice. My hope is we're a people of public theology, where there are some Christians who will stand up and will wrestle and will engage in the marketplace and in the public sphere about the issues that really matter from a Jesus perspective. And that we will wrestle, we will talk in the public place about what we think about penal reform and what we think about child poverty and what we think about bicultural in this country. We will stand and we will talk on those places. And we're a church which is also diverse. We're a church which we celebrate our diversity. Our diversity is not our weakness. Our diversity is our strength. That we actually can come from all sorts of different perspectives and bring all sorts of gifts to bear when we want to change something. That's why I think actually I'd be really, really sad to see the Anglican Church demise in this country. Because I think we have a unique place to play. So I think we actually need to work to actually reverse these statistics. Because why? Because I think God still wants those things present in his church in this country. Word and sacrament, local, global, historical, apostolic, incarnational, intellectual, justice-orientated, public theology, diversity is a strength, not a weakness. Those things are important. I remember talking to a church leader, though, when they suddenly looked at their demographic of their church and they suddenly looked at the curve of their church and realised actually how the under 50s were missing. And they actually said to me, they said, I have never been in this situation before. I've often come to churches, and it's easy, you just build up what's there. And they said to me, but hold on, I'm in this church where there is hardly anybody under 50, there's nothing to build up. I'm actually in a whole different situation now. I actually have to replant this. And nobody trained me to replant. And they were scared. Because they'd only been taught how to take a good thing and make it better. They'd never been taught actually how to replant something. How many of us in this room have ever planted from scratch a church that has sustained and goes on forever? For a few. How many, hands up straight, if you've ever planted an actual church? Okay, you see how many of us are worried? Because very few people have actually from the grassroots planted a church. I tell you what, I had this feeling of fear yesterday. I was at Wellington High School and invited to be part of a forum at lunchtime. Again, I couldn't believe it was a forum on multi-faith discussion. 100 kids turned up on their lunchtime. Again, people are interested. And I'm in this discussion. It's me, the Buddhists, the Hindus, the Muslims, and the atheist. And I was out of my depth. Nobody trained me in that. Nobody trained me how to stand, especially when my name got drawn out first. And I got this room of Wellington High School students, teenagers. I mean, I'm trying to bridge to them. Then I'm trying to think what I'm saying in relation to all these faiths. And then what am I saying in relation to the atheist? I was scared. You know, I'm so used to talking to captive audiences where you have to be here because you signed in. I was scared. And I think that's fine to be scared. That's fine. This is a whole new world. And we're going to go into that world, and we're going to look forward to that journey. It's going to be hard, but it's going to be a good journey. So how are we going to do this? How are we going to turn around this bulge? As I said at ministry school, it's this. It's people do not want to belong to an institution. The Anglican Church is the institution par excellence. We love it. When in doubt, let's have a committee. But people don't want to belong. It's not that they don't want to belong to us. They don't want to belong to an institution. They don't want to be a member of an institution. They don't want to be members of any institution. I mean, the cynicism around this election is just another classic example. So people don't want to be a member of an institution, but they do deeply want to belong relationally to people. And so we need to change our orientation. When people think of us, they don't think of an institution. They think of a group of people gathered around the table of God, inviting the highways and the byways in. And who doesn't want to come to a party? And who doesn't want to come to a party where the highways and the byways are there? And we have to change our thing. How do we change? We change our culture. We change our culture. How we do things is as important as what we do. In time, we need to adjust our structures. Our structures always need to follow the mission of God. It's a Sabbath principle. The Sabbath serves people, not we serve the Sabbath. In time, we have to change some structures, but that's fine. But primarily, we have to change the culture. Get the right culture, the other stuff flows from it. What's our culture? We've declared three things. First of all is that we are family. We're going to, at every level, at a congregational level, at a parish level, and across the diocese, we're going to work together as family. We're not islands. Secondly, what we're going to do is we're going to refine that we are a people who are discipled, and we cannot disciple people unless we've been discipled ourselves. So we've said we want our vestries to be, first and foremost, discipleship communities themselves. We're putting effort into championing different ways of discipleship. Casio, EFM, 3DM. We're putting priority into that. And we're asking all our lay leaders and clergy, we're asking everybody, look, if you're a leader, who are you discipling? Who are the 5 or 6 or 7 people that you yourself are on a long-term journey with, where you are doing all of life with them, where you will see and work with them to see the kingdom of God come in their life? The third thing we've said is this: we're a church of the lost, the last and the least. We're a church who prioritises proclamation of the gospel and the priority of the poor. We can say marginalised, we can say strugglers, whatever language you want to use. We're a church that prioritises proclamation of the gospel and the priority of the poor. That means whenever we have a youth group, we want to know that those things are the priority. Whenever we have a children's group, those things are a priority. Whenever you walk into one of our church services, you can tell that those things are a priority. That they flow through everything we do. Now it's interesting, every time I do this little thing, within a week or two, and I have this little talk about family discipleship and lost last least, then somebody comes up to me and says, so what's the plan? What's the vision? Come on, give us the roadmap. And I go, I thought I just did. And I think people are saying, well, what's the plan B? What's the other plan? Here's the thing. Again, the question is not where are we going, the question is who are we becoming? And as we become the people of God afresh, we can answer the other questions, because the other questions come from the culture that we have formed. Then we can work out the other stuff. But actually, we have to do that work. So, people say, well, wish the bishop would give us a plan. No. I've given the plan. I've been consistent in the plan. That's the plan. It's just interesting. So, this is from a Catholic theologian. I'm paraphrasing. Well, he says this: a Christian shouldn't try to perfect Christianity, but rather desire to perfect himself in Christianity. So let me change the wording a little bit. The Christian shouldn't try to perfect the church, but rather desire to perfect himself, herself in the church. The diocese is not a random thing out there. It's us and the people we represent. It's us being family. It's us being discipled, and it's us prioritising the lost, last and the least. And as we do these things, then the structures will change. There is a lot of good news to share. We are well on the way on this journey. We are not starting this journey. Remember the penal reform last year? That was amazing. We hit TV, we hit news, we hit local papers. Over half of our parish is actively involved in the Bible studies around penal reform. We talked publicly as a group that we thought this was an issue which was on God's heart. Child Poverty Forum was significant. We as the family gathered with the Catholic brothers and sisters, over 1,000, probably 1,100 of us made a clear statement that this is important. And it's very interesting how many of the political parties have now talked about child poverty constantly. It is an issue. Our hui at the beginning of this year, we said we're going to gather and equip people on our priorities. We had over 400 people in the cathedral. Not only do we equip people, but actually we worship together in the most beautiful way. Our discipleship programs, I am so glad when I talk to Judith and I hear that EFM has grown over this year and they plan to plant more EFM groups next year. When I talk to the Caseo people, I am encouraged. When I talk to the 3DM people and hear of their greater, more and more people being interested in 3DM, we're on the way. We're on the way. Schools pilgrimage. Basically, in the last 2 years, we have incredibly upped our relationship to the schools. We just had a 4-day pilgrimage which took us to Rangiatia, the grave of Octavius Hadfield, up the Wanganui River to Hiruharuma, where we talked about Suzanne Aubert and James K. Baxter, went to Parihaka, went to Motua Gardens. We took these young people and all the way along we weaved in the good news, the transforming news of Jesus. And so suddenly we're re-engaging with these thousands of young people in our schools. Our biculturalism journey, we have done so well over this last year. I mean, the amount of Māori Eucharists that get done around our diocese is amazing. But even today, just, actually we're starting to reflect that this is our home in Aotearoa and therefore we'll reflect that. It's really important. The amount of places going on the hikoi in the Kapiti Coast, which Donna organised over there, amazing hikoi. 300 of us took part in that hikoi. We traced our history of the gospel on the Kapiti Coast. We're doing well. And the clusters. All I'm hearing now is the review process which Nigel and others are doing around clusters. Actually, people are finding that life-giving. People are surprised. But you know what most of all always impresses me is this, is whenever I go to parishes, what I find is a courageous people who are saying constantly, we're up for it. We know things have got to change and we're up for it. And you know what? It's actually the older people are constantly saying this. I want to remind you of what we've said in the past. Last year we had this poem. This poem is still true as it was true last year. I am persuaded by the dandelion to take to the wings of the updrift, to parachute into enemy country, to fall to the ground, to be walked on, to lose beauty, to die, and to so give birth to a whole new generation of flyers. That's our call. We're going to live a life as a diocese where we fall to the ground, but in 20 years from now, there are other people who will benefit from Word and Sacrament, local, global, local church, a church which actually thinks about the issues, a church of justice, of public theology, incarnational, apostolic. In 20, 30 years' time, there'll be a church in New Zealand with those values. And we've talked about the wounded angel. And we said that many of us have been faithful for many years and just are struggling. That's fine. We'll carry each other. We're not going to leave anybody behind enemy lines. We'll carry each other. But we've got to be careful that those wings, those beautiful wings, don't come out and deliberately trip anybody up, okay? That's the rules. We're happy to carry people, but no little putting your wings out and tripping people up, okay? but we're happy to carry people. And finally, I want to leave you with this picture. When I was up here to Harama, we went to visit James K. Baxter's grave, and I was reminded of the story that James K. Baxter tells, and he tells it in relation to his community up here to Harama in relation to the difficulties of living together. But I actually think it's really relevant for us at this time in history, because I actually think it talks about many of us who struggle with change and transition, and there's a level where we are living in, and as I said earlier, I'm afraid. I want to tell you this story he tells. This is from his Jerusalem Daybook. A certain man decided life was too hard for him to bear. He did not commit suicide. Instead, he brought a large corrugated iron tank and furnished it simply with the necessities of life: a bed to sleep on, books to read, food to eat, electric light and heating, and even a large crucifix hung on the wall to remind him of God and help him to pray. There he lived a blameless life without interruption from the world. But there was one great hardship. Morning and evening, without fail, volleys of bullets would rip through the walls of his tank. He learned to lie on the floor to avoid being shot. Nevertheless, he did at times sustain wounds, and the iron walls were pierced with many holes that let in the wind and the daylight, and some water when the weather was bad. He plugged up the holes. He cursed the unknown marksman, but the police, when he appealed to them, were unhelpful, and there was little he could do about it on his own. By degrees, he began to use the bullet holes for a positive purpose. He would gaze out one hole or another and watch the people passing, the children flying kites, the lovers making love, the clouds in the sky, the wind in the trees, and the birds that came to feed on heads of grass. He would forget himself in observing these things. The day came when the tank rusted and finally fell to pieces. He walked out of it with little regret. There was a man with a gun standing outside. "I suppose you will kill me now," said the man who had come out of the tank. "But before you do it, I would like to know one thing. Why have you been persecuting me? Why are you my enemy? When have I never done you harm?" The other man laid the gun down and smiled at him. "I am not your enemy," he said. And the man who had come out of the tank saw that there were scars on the other man's hands and feet, and the scars were shining like the sun. I think we have nothing to fear from this brave world that we're entering. That actually, as the corrugated tank that we have been in for many years gets riddled with a few holes, actually, it's going to be good. It's going to be good on the other side, because Jesus is already waiting there for us and calling us out. Jesus has gone before us in transition and change, and we'll be fine. I want you now to split into groups of three briefly, and I'm going to ask you two questions and then get you to pray for each other. So from what you've heard this morning, first question, what resonated for you? Second question, what is God's invitation to you personally and corporately? So I want you to share those with each other in groups of 3 or 2, and then I want you to briefly pray for each other. And I'll just pull us back together with a song in a minute or two. What resonated to you from what you've heard this morning? Secondly, what is God's invitation to you personally and corporately in your parish or mission unit? And finally, pray for each other. In a few moments also, we will hand out a reduced copy of the talk I did at ministry school, which overlaps and is complementary to this. So they cover some of the stuff, but some different stuff. We'll come back together with a song in a minute. So split into 2s and 3s.